Ryan, tell us what's on your radar.
At midnight last night, 10,000 John Deere workers, mostly in the Midwest, went on strike, frustrated at the company's unacceptable contract offer, determined to win a better bargain, not just for themselves, but for future workers at the company. As a reminder, John Deere is on pace to earn profits of nearly $6 billion this year. And the big bipartisan infrastructure bill working its way through Congress will net them billions more. The reconciliation bill has hundreds of billions for climate projects, and many of those will require John Deere products. So you might think that now would be a good time for the company to invest in its workforce. The company clearly does not agree. What's going on with John Deere is a microcosm of what we're seeing around the country, and it's called a capital strike. When capital sees a fruitful investment opportunity but rejects it for a broader political goal, that's a capital strike. And that's what John Deere is doing here. It's a version of what businesses around the country are doing. They need workers, and many of them have the capital to pay them, but they don't want to empower those workers and reset the terms of the bargain between bosses and employees that was in place before the pandemic. They want pre-pandemic rules, and they are willing to suffer some losses to get there. That's a capital strike. It's happening in the context of what you could also start to call a general labor strike. But certainly it's not the kind in people's imaginations where all workers across the country or across a city walk out all at once. In fact, I'm pretty sure one of those is planned for sometime in October, but it's not likely to make a blip on any boss's radar, while what we're witnessing right now is. Those 10,000 John Deere workers joined some 4.3 million people who quit their jobs in August, as I talked about here yesterday. That's about double the normal monthly average. As Labor Notes reporter Jonah Furman notes, 60,000 IATSE workers in the TV and film industry are set to strike Monday if there's no deal. And 37,000 Kaiser Permanente workers in California have authorized a strike. These are healthcare workers like nurses, x-ray technicians, janitors, receptionists. And if you think they're not ready to strike, prepare to be surprised. What's happening right now as we open up after the pandemic is a reorganization of the economy. Relations between workers, bosses, and customers are being reorganized as part of that, and everybody is jockeying for position, even if many people on all sides are just following their gut instincts. But capital might be overplaying a hand that is weaker than they think. Before the capitalist class can beat back the resistance of labor, they have to figure out how to make their economy work again. The promises of globalization are falling apart, and they can't be put back together again without workers. And thanks to gig work, workers have ways of making ends meet that allow a bit more flexibility in between jobs, so they're not as desperate as bosses might want them to be. In fact, many of them want this fight. Here's how one John Deere worker put it to Jonah Furman, asking that it be posted anonymously. I want to read the whole thing because it's worth hearing to understand the mood on the shop floor. A month before October 1st, the call was a whisper, the worker writes. Some more fervent spoke of strike, but most vitriol spoken was tinged with the pain of calloused bruises, exploitation, and continual degradation from the company and the seeming willingness of the UAW International to sell out union members. The strike authorization vote in September was seen as posturing. Without it, the UAW could do little but roll over in negotiations. Very few thought it would actually be called, despite the desire for strike being present. UAW Deere employees expected to be left out in the cold. This was only magnified when October 1st came, went, and anticipation turned into extension. When the first tentative agreement was announced, employees were suspicious. Rightly so. The contract was lackluster. The word no was on the lips of anyone who spoke about it. And the vote on Sunday, October 10th, was predictable. However, what wasn't was the sheer magnitude of the solidarity, about 90% rejection across the board, a figure equally as unexpected as the UAW's setting of a strike deadline. Perhaps the UAW was forced to bare their teeth. Rumors abounded, non-wage employees being trained and assessed for line work, the union representatives on Monday being stonewalled by Deere's executives, the possibility of walkout, whose shifts were canceled, whose factories, which had high-level supervisors patrolling and propagandizing like prowling lions on the floor, and so on. Since Sunday's vote, the fever pitch has reached a great crescendo. The impetus was there, the opportunity presented, the desire to strike patent, and 10,000 wait for midnight to hear if their fervor will be met with solidarity or a blind eye. And so what I think this shows, Robbie, is that in a lot of ways, workers don't want the suffering that's going to come along with a strike, but they want this fight. Mm-hmm. Like, they're ready for this fight. And the IATSE workers, who are the film crews for streaming and for film, a bunch of them have been saying publicly, we need a break.
Yeah.
And you know what? Because they're so exhausted from being, run through the pandemic and now run through these, 12 to 18-hour shifts to feed this beast of streaming. They're like, if striking to get better conditions also means we get a break for a while, that's an upside to a strike.
You mentioned something interesting that I've actually not thought of about gig work.
Mm-hmm.
Can be a supplement, can be a fill-in, which is interesting because I've actually heard criticism also of the sort of gig economy from, I think, people in the labor movement or journalists who write about labor issues because gig work can evade some of the regulations in terms of pay, hours, benefits, etc. But just like you said, it can also be a benefit. It can also be a fill-in, can be something else for those people to do so that they can hold out and actually have make their stands against management in their normal jobs.
Yeah, if you're on the left, you're not supposed to say anything good about gig work.
Yeah, but I've noticed.
But it is a simple fact that if you're a worker who is who wants to challenge your bosses, either by walking out and quitting or by participating in a strike, this is available to you. Doesn't mean the companies aren't exploitative, doesn't mean this, that, and the other thing, but it means that is available to them. And so in the past, it was almost impossible, for work. Workers could, pick up a little bit of, work in the neighborhood, and there's strike funds that can get people through. But now, if you don't show up at your John Deere job, now in Waterloo it might be harder. But if you're near Des Moines, you could, make enough money to at least cobble together to hold on, so that you're in a stronger bargaining position against the bosses at the negotiating table, because their power has always been that they can wait you out.
Right.
But if there's these supply chain backups, if everybody's wants these John Deere products, the money's there for them. All they need to do is pay the workers to make the stuff. Now that does shift the balance of power.
Yeah, and they should come to the table with something that makes everybody happy, because we don't want to worsen the situation. Yeah. The situation is so bad right now.
Shut John Deere now.
Yeah.
And then Kaiser Permanente, if they go on strike.
Yeah.
Like you think the emergency rooms and the hospital system and the healthcare system is choked now? Watch 60,000 healthcare workers go on strike.
Can you imagine?
Which, speaking of needing a break, those are people who are ready to strike.
Right.
Just for the break.
Right.
Because they've just been driven into the ground.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm looking forward to seeing what's on your radar next.